The scream cut through the operating room like a blade through silk. Emily Carter's gloved hand trembled. Surgical forceps gripping something that shouldn't exist, a jagged piece of blackened metal, no larger than a thumbnail, crusted with rust and tissue. Blood pooled around the edges of the incision on Robert Hayes' neck. But it was the object itself that made her gasp. "What is that?" the scrub nurse whispered, her voice tight with confusion. Emily couldn't answer. In 23 years of surgery, she'd removed tumors, cysts, foreign objects swallowed by children. But this was different, man-made, deliberately shaped, serrated edges like teeth. The 76-year-old man on her table remained unconscious, his chest rising and falling with mechanical precision. He had no idea what she'd just found, no idea what questions would follow, no idea that the past, buried for 54 years, had finally decided to surface. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. 6 weeks earlier, Robert Hayes woke to the sound of silence. No alarm needed. His body remembered the rhythms of military discipline even after 54 years. 5:30 every morning without fail. He sat up slowly, joints protesting, and made his bed with precision. Hospital corners, 45-degree angles. Some habits never died. The kitchen held the ghost of routine. 2 placemats on the small table, though only one was needed now. Martha had been gone 3 years, but Robert couldn't bring himself to remove her place setting. The coffee maker gurgled to life, filling the house with a familiar aroma. He poured a single cup, black, no sugar. Hard men drank hard coffee, his father used to say. The radio on the counter clicked on automatically at 6. Sam Cooke's voice drifted through the room. "You send me?" And Robert let it play, Martha's favorite. He'd left the station unchanged since her funeral. Couldn't bear to turn the dial to something else. Sometimes, when the house was quiet, he could almost hear her humming along. He walked to the front window, coffee cup warming his arthritic hands. The American flag outside hung limp in the still morning air, its colors faded by years of Oregon rain and sun. It needed replacing, had needed replacing for months, but Robert kept putting it off. That flag had flown the day Martha died. Somehow, taking it down felt like losing her twice. His reflection caught in the glass an old man, 76, with deep lines carved around his eyes and his mouth. Gray stubble shadowed his jaw. When had he gotten so old he barely recognized himself anymore? The small craftsman house showed Martha's touch in every corner. Needlepoint pillows on the couch, including one that read, "Home is where the heart is." Framed photos on the mantel, their wedding in 1970, Sarah's graduation, grandchildren he barely knew. And there, beneath an altar table with Martha's portrait, sat the metal footlocker. Robert's eyes lingered on it, green paint flaking, corners dented to a padlock rusted shut. Engraved on the front, in faded letters, CPLR, Hayes. Every morning, he paused beside it. Every morning, his hand reached out. Every morning, he pulled back without opening it. Some boxes were meant to stay closed. He turned away, carrying his coffee to the front porch. The rocking chair creaked under his weight, the one Martha had made in 1970, her hands careful with wood and sandpaper. He sat, sipped his coffee, and watched the neighborhood wake up around him. Just another Friday, just another day of forgetting. But on his neck, beneath the collar of his shirt, Something small and dark pressed against his skin, something that had been waiting, patient and honed, for 54 years. The mole appeared on a Monday morning while Robert was shaving, a small reddish spot just below his left jawline, no bigger than a pencil eraser. He paused, razor in a hand, and leaned closer to the bathroom mirror. "Huh," he muttered, "wasn't there yesterday." He touched it with his fingertip, slightly raised, firm to the touch, except, well, probably just an age spot, he thought. At 76, things appeared without warning: liver spots, skin tags, the general deterioration of a body that had seen too many years. He wiped the shaving cream from his face and forgot about it. By Wednesday, the spot had darkened to a deep red, almost purple. Robert noticed it while buttoning his shirt, his fingers brushing against the raised bump, a little bigger now, maybe the size of a pea. It itched slightly when he touched it. He resisted the urge to scratch. "Getting old," he said to his reflection. "Everything shows up uninvited." Friday morning brought his weekly ritual, the navy blue shirt. For 46 years, he'd worn it every Friday without fail. It had been Martha's favorite, the one he'd worn the day he came home from the war. She'd asked him to wear it once a week, a promise that he was really home, really hers. Even after her death, he'd kept the tradition. Some promises outlasted the people who made them, but when he tried to button the collar, it wouldn't close. The mole, no. It was too large to call it a mole, now pressed against the fabric. Robert examined it in the mirror again. The size of a grape, the skin around it taking on a grayish-blue tinge, like old bruises spreading outward, dark veins, thin as spider silk, radiated from the center. For the first time, a thread of unease wound through his chest. That evening, his daughter called. Sarah's face appeared on his phone screen, crisp and clear from her home in Seattle. She was 48 now. Her mother's eyes, but her own determined jaw. A surgeon, successful, busy. They talked every Friday, a routine they'd maintained even through the years of distance between them. "Hey, Dad," she said, smiling. "How was your week?" "Same as always," Robert replied. "Quiet." Sarah's smile faltered. Her eyes narrowed, focusing on something. "Dad, what's that on your neck?" Robert's hand instinctively moved to cover the spot. "Nothing, just a mole." "That doesn't look like just a mole." Her voice shifted, taking on the clinical tone she used with patients. "How long has it been there?" "A week, maybe." "It's fine." "Sarah?" "Dad, that looks abnormal. You need to get it checked." Robert felt his jaw tighten. This was familiar ground. Sarah telling him what to do, him resisting. "I don't need a doctor for an age spot. That's not an age spot." Sarah leaned closer to her camera. "Is it painful? Does it bleed?" "It's fine." "Dad," I said, "it's fine." His voice came out sharper than he intended. The silence that followed crackled with tension. Sarah took a breath. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, but no less insistent. "This is exactly why Mom worried about you. You never take care of yourself." "Your mother understood me," Robert said quietly. "Did she?" Sarah's words hung in the air. Or did she just stop trying to change you? The question hit harder than he expected. Robert looked away from the screen, his throat tight. "I should go." "Dad, wait." "Good night, Sarah." He ended the call before she could respond. The house settled back into silence. Robert sat in his rocking chair, the phone dark in his hand. Through the window, the street lights flickered on, casting long shadows across his front yard. He raised his hand to his neck, fingers finding the raised bump. It throbbed beneath his touch, a dull, persistent pulse, like a second heartbeat trapped under his skin. "She's right, Martha," he whispered to the empty room. "She's always right." But going to a doctor meant questions, examinations, poking and prodding at things better left alone. Robert had spent a lifetime avoiding doctors, avoiding questions, avoiding the past that tried to surface every time he closed his eyes. He stood, joints creaking, and walked to the bathroom. Under the harsh fluorescent light, he examined the mole again. The grayish-blue discoloration had spread, creeping toward his collarbone like roots searching for soil. The raised bump was hard now, unnaturally solid. Deep in his chest, fear whispered what he already knew. This wasn't normal. This wasn't age. This was something else entirely. 2:47 in the morning. Robert awoke to darkness and the feeling that something was wrong. Not a sound from outside, not a nightmare pulling him from sleep. Something else, a sensation he couldn't name, like insects crawling beneath his skin. He lay still, heart hammering, trying to orient himself. The bedroom was quiet, the house was quiet, everything was as it should be, except for the faint vibration in his neck. Robert's hand moved to his throat. The lump pulsed beneath his fingertips, a rhythmic throbbing that didn't match his heartbeat. And there was something else, a sound so soft he almost missed it, a metallic scraping, like a knife dragged slowly across steel. It came from inside him. He threw off the covers and stumbled to the bathroom, flipping on the light. The fluorescent bulb flickered before catching, bathing everything in harsh white. Robert gripped the edge of the sink and stared at his reflection. The lump had grown. No longer the size of a grape, now it bulged like a small egg pressing against his skin from the inside. The grayish-blue discoloration had spread in thin lines, dark veins that crept toward his jaw and down toward his collarbone. They looked like roots, like something was growing inside him, sending out feeders. Moonlight streamed through the bathroom window, catching his profile on the wall. His shadow loomed, neck grotesquely misshapen. Robert turned away from it, bile rising in his throat, on his pillow. When he returned to the bedroom, he found a small blood stain, fresh, still damp. He touched his neck. His fingers came away clean. But the blood was there, a dark smear on the white pillowcase, as if something had tried to push through his skin while he slept, then retreated. Robert didn't sleep again that night. By Monday morning, the navy blue shirt hung unworn in his closet. He couldn't button it, couldn't even pull the collar around his neck without pain shooting down his spine. For the first time in 46 years, he broke the Friday tradition. The shirt stayed on its hanger, a small failure that felt like a much larger one. The lump consumed his thoughts. Every swallow hurt. Turning his head sent sharp pains through his skull. He couldn't drink his morning coffee without wincing. The normalcy of his routine crumbled around him, each familiar action now tainted with discomfort. Tuesday afternoon. He picked up the phone. His pride and his fear warred with each other as he stared at the screen. Finally, fear won. He dialed the local clinic. "Riverside Medical, how can I help you?" The receptionist's voice was bright, professional. "I need to see a doctor." Robert's voice came out rougher than he intended. "About something on my neck. Of course. Let me check our schedule. Keys clicked in the background. Dart Patterson has an opening 3 weeks from Thursday. 3 weeks, Robert interrupted. I need to be seen sooner than that. I'm sorry, sir. That's our earliest availability. If it's an emergency, you should go to the ER. It's not. He stopped. Was it an emergency? The lump throbbed as if answering. Never mind. He hung up before she could respond. 3 weeks. He looked at himself in the hallway mirror. 3 weeks might be too long. The thought terrified him more than he wanted to admit. That night, sleep brought memories he'd spent decades trying to forget. Not dreams. Memories had weight, texture, the quality of truth that nightmares lacked. Da Nang's école, the bunker's earthen walls, the smell of rain and gunpowder. A young man's face, Private James Daniels, 20 years old, showing a creased photograph. That's Betty, Daniels said, grinning. Gonna marry her when I get home. Robertson, 23 and just as young, pulled out his own photo. This is Martha. Same plan. We're gonna make it. Right, Hayes? Daniel's eyes were wide, too young for the fear they held. Damn right we are. Then the alarm, artillery incoming, the grenade bouncing once, twice on the dirt floor, Robert's body moving before his mind caught up, shoving Daniels aside, taking the blast himself. The world exploded in fire and metal. Robert woke gasping, his hand clutched to his neck. The same spot, the exact same spot where Daniels had been wounded in another memory, the one that came after. The memory of blood and screaming and a young man dying despite Robert's desperate attempts to save him. His pillow was soaked with sweat. His heart raced. And his neck, the lump seemed to pulse in time with the phantom sound of explosions. Wednesday morning, Robert made the decision. He would go to the emergency room. Pride be damned. Fear be damned. Something was wrong. Had been wrong for a long time. And he couldn't ignore it anymore. But first, he did something he hadn't done in years. He walked to the metal footlocker, knelt before it with creaking knees, and touched the rusted padlock. His hands shook. Inside this box were things he'd buried, medals he'd never worn, memories he'd never shared, a past he'd locked away the day he came home. Maybe it was time. But when he tried to open the lock, it wouldn't budge, rusted shut after decades of neglect. Some doors, once closed, refused to open again. Robert stood, his decision made. Tomorrow, he would see a doctor. Tomorrow, he would face whatever this was. Tonight, the past could stay buried a little longer. The waiting room at Riverside Medical smelled of antiseptic and anxiety. Robert sat in a plastic chair, surrounded by coughing patients and crying children, filling out forms clipped to a worn clipboard. Duration of symptoms, 3 weeks? He underestimated medical history. The boxes blurred together. He checked none for most of them, though it wasn't entirely true. A nurse called his name. She was young, efficient, smiled too much. Mr. Hayes, let's get your vitals. The blood pressure cuff squeezed his arm. A bit high, she noted, scribbling on her chart. Nervous. I don't do doctors, Robert said. She laughed as if he'd made a joke. The examination room was small, sterile, diplomas hung on the wall. Johns Hopkins. Impressive credentials. A family photo sat on the desk, 2 children in soccer uniforms, grass-stained and grinning. It made the room feel less clinical, more human. Robert focused on it while he waited. trying to steady his breathing. The door opened. Dr. Emily Carter entered. 48. Her dark hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her wedding ring was simple silver, worn thin by years. She moved with the confidence of someone who'd seen everything, or thought she had. "Mr. Hayes," she extended her hand. Her grip was firm, professional. "I'm Carter. Let's take a look at what's bothering you." Robert tilted his head back, exposing his neck. He watched her face in his peripheral vision, waiting for her reaction. It came immediately. Her expression shifted, brow furrowing, lips pressing together. She stepped closer, her gloved fingers gentle but probing as they examined the lump. The silence stretched. 5 seconds, 10, 15. "How long has this been here?" Her voice was carefully neutral. 3 weeks, maybe 4. Dr. Carter's fingers continued their exploration, feeling the edges of the growth, the darkened veins spreading from it. "Has it changed in size?" "Yes. Started small, like a mole. Any pain, a difficulty swallowing?" "Both. Gets worse every day." She pulled back, her professional mask firmly in place. But Red Robert caught the flicker of concern in her eyes. "Mr. Hayes, I need to do a biopsy. Today." The word hung in the air between them. Biopsy meant cancer. Everyone knew that. "Is it cancer?" Robert asked, his voice steadier than he felt. Carter met his eyes. "I don't know, but this doesn't feel like normal tissue." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I've been practicing for 23 years. I've never felt anything quite like this." That admission frightened Robert more than a cancer diagnosis would have. The biopsy tray appeared sterile instruments on a blue cloth. The needle was thick, 18 gauge, intimidating. Carter prepared the local anesthetic, her movements practiced and precise. "You'll feel a pinch, then pressure." She cleaned the area with cold antiseptic. "Try to stay still." The anesthetic burned going in. Robert gripped the armrests of the examination chair, knuckles white. Dr. Carter waited a moment for it to take effect, then positioned the biopsy needle against his neck. "Deep breath," she instructed. The needle pierced his skin. Robert felt pressure, then something else, a sound, a soft crunch, like the needle had struck something hard and hollow instead of soft tissue. Carter's hands paused. "That's unusual," she murmured. She tried to withdraw the needle. It didn't move. Her grip tightened, pulling harder. The needle remained stuck, embedded in whatever lay beneath his skin. "Mr. Hayes." "Hold very still." Her voice stayed calm, but tension crept into it. She placed one gloved hand on his shoulder for leverage, the other gripping the needle hub. She pulled steadily, firmly. Robert felt a sharp tug deep in his neck, felt something resist, then suddenly release. The needle came free. Dr. Carter held it up to the light. Robert watched her face change. The sample in the needle wasn't what it should be. Instead of tissue and blood, a thick, yellowish-gray fluid clung to the metal. The smell hit them both metallic, wrong. And there was no blood, none at all. "What the hell?" Carter whispered, forgetting her professional composure. She quickly transferred the sample to a collection tube, sealed it. Her hands moved efficiently, but Robert noticed they trembled slightly. I'm sending this to the lab. Rush processing. I want results by end of day. She turned back to him. Mr. Hayes, have you ever had any surgeries, any foreign objects implanted, medical devices? No. Nothing like that? Military service? Robert's jaw tightened. Yes. Army. Vietnam. Any injuries? Any shrapnel wounds? The question hit like a physical blow. Robert's hand instinctively moved to his neck, covering the lump. I was wounded, but that was 54 years ago. Doctor, Carter's eyes sharpened. Where were you wounded? Robert's throat felt tight. Neck, among other places. Field medic patched me up, sent me back to duty. Did they remove any foreign objects? Any metal fragments? The room seemed to shrink around him. They said some pieces were too close to my spine, too dangerous to remove. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. They said my body would wall them off, that I'd be fine. Doctor. Carter was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. Mr. Hayes, I think we need to do more than a biopsy. I'm calling Providence Portland Medical Center. They have the imaging equipment and surgical facilities we might need. You think there's something in there after all these years? I don't know what to think yet, but I do know this needs immediate attention. She pulled out her phone. Can someone drive you to Portland? I don't want you driving yourself. Robert thought of Sarah, 3 hours away in Seattle. I can drive. Mr. Hayes, I'll be fine. Carter studied him, clearly wanting to argue, then nodded. They're expecting you in 2 hours. Don't delay if you feel dizzy. Chest pain, anything unusual, you call 911. Understood. Robert nodded. As he stood to leave, Carter placed a hand on his arm. Mr. Hayes, I've been a doctor for a long time. I've learned to trust my instincts. She paused. Whatever this is, I don't think it's cancer, but I also don't think you should be alone right now. Is there someone you can call? Robert thought of his empty house, the silent rooms, the locked footlocker. He thought of Sarah and their strained phone call, the distance between them that measured more than miles. I'll call my daughter, he heard himself say. In his truck, hands shaking, he dialed Sarah's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. He almost hung up. This wasn't his way, asking for help, admitting weakness. Dad? Sarah's voice was surprised. He never called her, always waited for her weekly calls to him. Sarah, his voice cracked, I'm going to Portland, to Providence Medical Center, for surgery. When? What kind of surgery? Today, 2 hours. Dad, what's going on? Alarm sharpened her voice. The mole. It's not a mole. There might be something. He couldn't finish the sentence. I'm coming. Don't argue. I'm leaving now. Sarah, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Mom would have wanted me there. Her voice softened. I want to be there. I'm leaving right now. I'll meet you at the hospital. She hung up before he could protest further. Robert sat in his truck, phone in hand, staring at the clinic's brick facade. 3 weeks ago, his biggest concern had been whether to replace the flag outside his house. Now, his daughter was driving 3 hours because something that should have killed him 54 years ago had decided to wake up. He started the engine and pointed the truck toward Portland, toward answers he wasn't sure he wanted, toward a past that refused to stay buried. In his rearview mirror, the clinic grew smaller, but the pressure in his neck remained constant, a reminder that some wounds, no matter how old, never truly heal. They just wait. Providence, Portland Medical Center, loomed against the gray Oregon sky, all glass and steel, and the institutional promise of healing. Robert signed forms he didn't read, answered questions from nurses who smiled with practiced sympathy. His blood pressure was high, his heart rate elevated. Everything about him screamed fear, though his face remained impassive. A surgeon appeared, Dr. James Mitchell, introduced as a specialist in complex extractions. He was younger than Robert expected, maybe 50, with steady hands and careful eyes. "Mr. Hayes, Dr. Carter sent over your imaging." He pulled up X-rays on a computer screen. "I need you to understand what we're dealing with here." The images showed Robert's neck in stark black and white. And there, bright against the gray of soft tissue, were three distinct objects, small, jagged, angular, man-made shapes where nature should have been smooth. "These are metal fragments," Dr. Mitchell said, pointing. "This one here," he indicated the largest piece, "is what's causing your current symptoms. It's shifted position, likely due to inflammation or your body's attempt to expel it. That's what created the lump." "And the others?" Robert's voice was hoarse. "This one is lodged near your carotid artery." Dr. Mitchell's finger moved to the second fragment. "This one is touching your C4 vertebra, your spinal cord." The room felt suddenly smaller. "For 54 years, yes, your body formed scar tissue around them, which is why you didn't have symptoms until now. But the tissue has broken down, likely due to age-related changes in your immune system. The fragments are now mobile." "What does that mean?" Dr. Mitchell met his eyes. "It means we need to remove them today. The one near your artery could cause a stroke. The one near your spine could cause paralysis, or worse if it shifts. And if you operate, there are risks. The surgery is delicate. We're working near major blood vessels and neural tissue. There's a risk of stroke, paralysis, or death during the procedure." Robert absorbed this. 54 years of living with death inside him, and now it demanded a reckoning. "What are my odds? If we don't operate, you'll likely die within the week from a catastrophic bleed or spinal injury." "Doctor," Mitchell's voice was gentle but unflinching, "if we do operate, you have approximately a 60% chance of full recovery, 20% chance of some permanent deficit, voice changes, limited mobility, 20% chance you don't make it off the table." 60%. Robert had survived worse odds in Vietnam. "When?" "I have an OR reserved for 5 o'clock. 3 hours." The waiting began. Robert sat in a pre-surgical room, dressed in a hospital gown that opened in the back, an IV already placed in his arm. The indignity of it all reduced to a patient, vulnerable, waiting. The door burst open. Sarah stood in the doorway, breathless, her hair disheveled from the drive. She'd made the 3-hour trip in 2.5. "Dad!" She crossed the room quickly, and for the first time in years, She took his hand without hesitation. Robert looked at their joined hands, his spotted with age and scarred from decades of work. Hers smooth and capable, a surgeon's hands. You didn't have to speed. Yes, I did. Sarah pulled up a chair, sat close. Tell me everything. He did. The mole, the growth, Carter's biopsy, the fragments lodged in his neck for more than half a century. Sarah listened, her professional mask firmly in place, but her hand tightened around his with each detail. You never told us, she said when he finished. Mom never knew. I didn't want to worry her. The excuse sounded weak even to his own ears. Dad, she was your wife. She deserved to know. I know. Robert looked away. I thought I was protecting her, protecting you by not talking about the war, about what happened over there. I thought I could keep it separate, keep you safe from it. We weren't safe from it. Sarah's voice cracked. It was always there. You were always somewhere else, even when you were home. Do you know how many times I tried to talk to you, really talk to you, and you just... She stopped, composed herself. I thought you didn't love me, that I'd done something wrong. The words hit Robert like shrapnel. Sarah, no, I loved you. I love you. Then why did it feel like you were always leaving, even when you stayed? Robert's throat tightened. The IV in his arm seemed to throb with his pulse. Because part of me never left Vietnam. Part of me is still in that bunker, watching my friend die. His voice dropped to a whisper. His name was James Daniels. He was 20 years old. Sarah waited, silent, giving him space to continue. There was a grenade. I pushed him out of the way, took the blast myself. Robert touched his neck, feeling the lump beneath the hospital gown. The field medic said the shrapnel was too close to my spine to remove safely, said I'd be fine, that my body would adapt. But you weren't fine. No, I carried it every day, a reminder that I saved him that day. But 3 months later, he died anyway, in an ambush, and I couldn't do anything about it. The tears burned in Robert's eyes, the first he'd shed in decades. I survived. He didn't, and I never understood why. Sarah's hand tightened around his. Dad, you can't blame yourself for surviving. I don't blame myself for surviving. I blame myself for not living. Robert looked at his daughter, really looked at her, seeing Martha's eyes staring back at him. I was so afraid of feeling the pain that I stopped feeling everything, and you paid the price for that. I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm so sorry. Sarah leaned forward, resting her forehead against his shoulder. I wish you told me sooner, but I'm glad you told me now. They sat like that for a long moment, the noise of the hospital fading around them. An announcement over the intercom, footsteps in the hallway, the mechanical beep of monitors. A nurse knocked, entered. Mr. Hayes, it's time. Sarah straightened, wiping her eyes. I'll be here when you wake up. Sarah, if I don't, you will. Her voice was fierce, brooking no argument. She squeezed his hand one more time. You don't get to leave, not now, not when we just found each other again. Robert nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat, the one made of emotion, not metal. They wheeled him toward the operating room. The ceiling tiles passed overhead in a blur of white. Sarah's face disappeared as the doors swung closed. Then there was just the bright surgical light, Dr. Mitchell's masked face, and a voice telling him to count backward from 100 at 97. Robert saw Martha's face, young and smiling, at 94. He saw Daniel's, laughing in the bunker, at 91, he thought. If I die, at least Sarah knows the truth. At 88, darkness took him. Robert woke to beeping, steady, rhythmic, the sound of machines tracking life. His throat was raw, his neck wrapped in bandages that felt too tight. Pain throbbed beneath the gauze, dull and insistent. He tried to turn his head, fire shot down his spine, forcing him still. Dad, Sarah's face appeared above him, pale and exhausted. Don't move. You're in recovery. He tried to speak. His voice came out as a rasp, barely audible. How long? 4 hours. The surgery took 4 hours. Sarah's hand found his, gripping tight. Dirt! Mitchell said it was complicated, more complicated than they expected. The surgical resident appeared, young and serious, checking monitors. Mr. Hayes, can you squeeze my hand? Robert complied. First the right, then the left. Good. Can you wiggle your toes? He could, though it took effort. Excellent. Any numbness? Tingling? No. Robert croaked. Hurts. That's normal. We'll manage the pain. The resident made notes on a tablet. Dr. Mitchell will be in soon to discuss the surgery. When the doctor finally arrived, still in surgical scrubs, his face carried the weight of the operation. He pulled up a chair beside Robert's bed, Sarah standing close. We removed 2 of the 3 fragments. Dr. Mitchell began. The first one came out cleanly. That was the one causing your immediate symptoms. The second, near your carotid artery, took 90 minutes to extract. It was embedded in scar tissue, wrapped around a nerve bundle. And the third, Sarah asked. Dr. Mitchell's expression darkened. The one touching your spine. When we tried to remove it, it shifted closer to the cord. We had to stop. Robert felt his chest tighten. It's still in there. Yes, removing it would have resulted in immediate paralysis or worse. The fragment is stable. Where it is, we've cleaned the surrounding tissue, reduced inflammation. You should have years, possibly decades, without symptoms. Should have. Robert caught the qualifier. Nothing in medicine is certain, Mr. Hayes. But you're alive. Your mobility is intact. Those are victories. After Dr. Mitchell left, Sarah sank into the chair beside his bed. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her professional composure cracked. I thought I was going to lose you, she whispered. When they said there were complications, when the surgery kept going longer, her voice broke. But you didn't, Robert said, each word an effort. I'm still here, with a piece of shrapnel still in your neck. Better than having all 3. Sarah laughed, a wet, exhausted sound. That's one way to look at it. The days blurred together. Pain medication made time elastic, stretching and compressing unpredictably. Robert drifted between sleep and waking, between memory and present. Physical therapists came, gentle and insistent, making him sit up, stand, walk short distances. Each movement was agony, but he pushed through. He'd survived worse. On the 3rd day, Dr. Mitchell brought something to his room, a small glass vial filled with clear preservative. Inside floated two pieces of blackened metal, jagged and cruel-looking. "These are what we removed," the doctor said, holding the vial up to the light. "I thought you might want them." Robert stared at the fragments. 54 years they'd been inside him, foreign bodies that his flesh had tried and failed to absorb. He reached for the vial with trembling hands. "That's shrapnel from an M26 grenade," he said quietly. "I'd recognize it anywhere." And Sarah took the vial from him, examining the fragments with a surgeon's eye. "Dad, you lived with this for over half a century. How?" "Didn't have a choice." Robert's voice was getting stronger, though still hoarse. "You carry what you carry. You keep going, but at what cost?" Sarah set the vial on the bedside table. "You carried this. You carried the guilt. You carried the silence. And it nearly killed you." Robert had no answer. She was right. The weight he'd borne, invisible to everyone around him, had slowly poisoned him from the inside. Not just the metal, but the memories attached to it, the guilt, the grief, the things he'd never said. "When I get out of here," he said slowly, "I need to tell you about Daniels. Really tell you everything." "I'd like that, and the footlocker under your mother's picture. We need to open it." Sarah's eyebrows rose. "You never opened that?" "I know, but it's time." Robert closed his eyes, exhaustion pulling at him. "Your mother left something in there for me. A letter. I was afraid to read it." "Why?" "Because I thought she'd hate me if she knew the truth about the war, about how broken I was." His voice cracked. "But I think maybe she already knew, and maybe she loved me anyway." Sarah leaned forward, kissed his forehead. "Of course she did, Dad, just like I do." Robert fell asleep with those words wrapped around him, a comfort he hadn't let himself feel in 54 years. Sarah made the drive to her father's house on the 5th day of his hospital stay. The key felt heavy in her hand as she unlocked the front door, stepping into the quiet that had become her father's life. The air smelled faintly of coffee and old wood, of a house where one person lived alone with too many memories. She found the footlocker exactly where it had always been, beneath the small altar table holding her mother's photograph. Martha smiled out from the frame, forever 49, forever healthy, forever the woman who'd held their family together through silence and distance. The padlock was rusted shut. Sarah tried the key her father had given her, but it wouldn't turn. She went to the garage, found a hammer and chisel, and returned with purpose. The first strike echoed through the empty house. The second cracked the lock's casing. The third broke it free. Inside, wrapped in faded cloth, were the fragments of a man's military service, a Purple Heart medal, tarnished but intact, a bronze star for valor, a small folded American flag, the kind given at military funerals, photographs her father impossibly young in uniform, standing beside another soldier with his arm slung over the man's shoulders. Both were grinning, unaware of what was coming. At the bottom of the footlocker, she found the envelope, yellowed with age, her mother's handwriting unmistakable on the front. "For Robert, to be opened when you're ready." The postmark read, March 15th, 2018, 1 week before Martha died. Sarah's hands shook as she carried the box back to the hospital. Robert was sitting up when she arrived, the neck brace making him hold his head at an awkward angle. His eyes went to the footlocker immediately, something like fear crossing his face. "You opened it. I had to break the lock." Sarah set the box on the bedside table. "Dad, there's a letter from Mom." "I know." His voice was barely a whisper. "She told me she'd left something, but I couldn't. I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "That she knew everything, see, and that knowing made her hate me." Robert's eyes were fixed on the envelope Sarah now held. That her last words would be disappointment. Sarah turned the envelope over in her hands. "Dad, Mom loved you for 46 years. She didn't stay out of obligation. You don't understand. The things I did, the things I saw, I was broken. Sarah, your mother deserved better than a broken man. Then let her tell you that herself." Sarah held out the envelope. "Read it." Robert's hands trembled as he took it. For a long moment, he just stared at Martha's handwriting, his thumb tracing the curves of his name. Then, carefully, he opened it. The paper inside was lined notebook paper, filled with Martha's neat script. Robert's eyes moved over the words, and Sarah watched his face transform confusion, then shock. Then something that looked like breaking and healing happening simultaneously. Tears streamed down his weathered cheeks, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "Dad." Sarah moved closer, alarmed. "What does it say?" Robert couldn't speak. He handed her the letter, his hand covering his mouth. As he wept, Sarah read aloud, her voice steady at first, then wavering. "My dearest Robert, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I need you to know something. For 46 years, you never told me about the shrapnel, but I knew. I felt it every time I laid my head on your shoulder, that little hard spot on your neck. You never told me about Daniel's either. But I heard you cry his name in your sleep for 30 years. You think you failed him. You think you should have saved him. But, Robert, you did save him. You gave him 3 more months. 3 months to write letters home, to tell his mother he loved her. You gave him the gift of goodbye. And you saved me by coming home alive, by giving me 46 years of blue shirts every Friday, of coffee every morning, of that crooked smile when I burnt the cornbread. I knew you were carrying something heavy. I knew you were fighting a war that never ended. But I also knew you were trying. Every day, you were trying to be present, even when the past pulled at you. The shrapnel in your neck isn't a reminder of failure. It's a medal that says this man chose to live, to love, to come home. Don't carry it as a burden anymore, my love. Carry it as proof that you survived, proof that love wins. I need you to forgive yourself, Robert, for Daniels, for the distance, for all the things you think you did wrong, because from where I stood, you did everything right. You came home, you stayed, you loved us the best way you knew how. And that blue shirt, I didn't ask you to wear it to make sure you were home. I asked because I loved seeing you in it, because it was what you wore the day my life truly began. Every Friday was a reminder that I got to keep you. Don't spend whatever time you have left locked away with ghosts. Live, Robert, really live. Talk to Sarah. Let her in. Tell her about Daniels, about the war, about everything you've kept buried. She's stronger than you think. She's our daughter. She can handle the truth. I'll be waiting for you when you're ready. Take your time. Live fully. and know that every moment we had was worth it. Every single one. Forever yours, Martha. The room was silent, except for Robert's ragged breathing. Sarah carefully folded the letter, her own tears falling freely now. She sat on the edge of his hospital bed and took his hand. She knew, Dad. She always knew, and she loved you anyway. I wasted so much time, Robert said, his voice broken. So much time being afraid, thinking I was protecting her by not talking. But I was just protecting myself from feeling it. She understood that too. Look what she wrote. She said you were trying, but that's what she saw. Not the failure, the effort. Robert pulled Sarah close, embracing her for the first time in years, maybe decades. She felt how fragile he'd become, how the surgery and age had carved away at him. But she also felt something else a loosening, as if chains he'd worn for 54 years were finally falling away. "Tell me about him," Sarah said softly. "About Daniels." And Robert did. He told her about James Daniels, 20 years old, from Iowa, engaged to a girl named Betty. How Daniels would show everyone the photo of her, talk about the farm they'd run together, the children they'd have. How on March 15th, 1960, in a bunker in Da Nang, a grenade had bounced across the dirt floor. How Robert's body had moved before his mind caught up, shoving Daniels aside, taking the blast himself. The field medic said the shrapnel was too close to my spine, too dangerous to remove, said I'd be fine. That thousands of vets lived with shrapnel, but then they wanted to evacuate me to Japan for better treatment. Robert's voice was hoarse from emotion and damaged vocal cords. Lieutenant Morrison said if I left, I'd be abandoning my unit, abandoning Daniels. So I stayed. And Daniels died 3 months later. Ambush. I was on patrol in a different sector. Couldn't save him. Robert's eyes were distant, seeing a past Sarah could never fully understand. For 54 years, I thought I'd made the wrong choice, that I should have taken the evacuation, should have gotten the surgery, that staying accomplished nothing. But Mom's letter says I gave him time, that those 3 months mattered. Robert looked at his daughter. I never thought of it that way. I only saw the end, him dying, not the time before. Sarah squeezed his hand. Sometimes we can't see the good we do. We only see where we fell short. Your mother saw it. She always saw more than I gave her credit for. She did. And she wants you to live, Dad. Really live. Starting now. Robert nodded slowly, his gaze falling on the glass vial containing the 2 fragments of shrapnel. 54 years inside him. A lifetime of carrying death when he should have been carrying life. I'm ready, he said quietly. I'm ready to try. 3 weeks after the surgery, Robert was discharged. Sarah drove him home in her car, his truck still parked in the hospital lot where he'd left it a lifetime ago. The neck brace was gone, replaced by thick bandages and instructions for physical therapy 3 times a week. His voice remained hoarse, permanently damaged by the proximity of the surgery to his vocal cords. Mitchell said it might improve slightly with time, but would never be the same. Small price for being alive, Robert had said, and meant it. The house looked different when they arrived, cleaner. Sarah had spent the past weeks coming and going, tidying, organizing. The front porch had been swept. The faded, worn flag, had been replaced with a new one, crisp and bright against the gray Oregon sky. "Sarah, you didn't have to." "I wanted to." She helped him up the steps, moving slowly. Besides, I had help. The front door opened. 2 teenagers emerged, a boy about 15 and a girl about 13. Sarah's children, whom Robert had seen perhaps a dozen times in their lives. They stood awkwardly, unsure. "Grandpa," the boy said, "Mom said you were sick." Robert's throat tightened. "I was, but I'm better now." The girl stepped forward, bolder. "She said you're a hero from the war." "I'm not a hero, sweetheart, just a survivor. Mom says that's the same thing." Over the following weeks, the house filled with life in a way it hadn't since Martha died. Sarah had taken a temporary leave from her practice in Seattle, moved into the guest room with her kids, taking over the converted attic space. She drove Robert to physical therapy appointments, helped him with the exercises, made sure he took his medications. But more than that, they talked, really talked, for the first time in decades. One evening, sitting on the front porch as the sun set, Sarah asked the question she'd been holding. "Why did you become so distant after the war? You came home, married Mom, had me. What changed?" Robert was quiet for a long time, the rocking chair creaking beneath him. "Nothing changed. That was the problem. I came home, but I didn't know how to be home. Your mother, she was patient. She gave me space. But you," his voice caught, "you needed a father. And I didn't know how to be one, not with the war still in my head. The nightmares. Every night for years, I'd wake up screaming, and your mother would hold me until I could breathe again. I was terrified I'd hurt one of you during an episode, so I started sleeping in the spare room, started working extra shifts at the aerospace plant. The noise there drowned out the noise in my head. I thought you just didn't want to be around us. I didn't want to damage you. I thought if I kept my distance, kept the war contained, you'd be safe from it." Robert turned to his daughter. "I was wrong. The distance hurt you worse than the truth would have." "Yeah," Sarah said softly, "it did." "I'm sorry. I know, and I forgive you." She reached over, took his weathered hand. "But, Dad, I need you to forgive yourself, too. For Daniels, for the distance, for all of it." Robert looked at their joined hands, thinking of Martha's letter, of the weight he'd carried for 54 years. "I'm trying." The story of Robert's surgery spread through the veteran community faster than he expected. A local news station ran a piece about the 76-year-old veteran who'd lived for over half a century with shrapnel in his neck. Unknowingly, the story went viral, shared across social media, picked up by national outlets. Within a week, 47 other Vietnam veterans contacted Providence Portland Medical Center. They all had the same story: shrapnel wounds from the war. Field medics who'd said the fragments were too dangerous to remove, decades of living with metal inside their bodies. Dr. Mitchell organized a free screening clinic. Robert attended, finding himself surrounded by men his age, all carrying invisible burdens. They traded stories, compared scars, shared the silence of those who'd survived when others hadn't. One veteran, a man named William Grant, approached Robert after the screening. "I saw your story on the news. The part about your friend Daniels? What about it? Grant's eyes were wet. I had a buddy, too, Marcus Webb. I watched him die in Khe Sanh, spent 40 years thinking I should have saved him. Your story, it made me realize maybe just being there mattered. Maybe that was enough. Robert gripped the man's shoulder, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Mitchell pulled Robert aside afterward. Mr. Hayes, you've started something here. These men, they've been carrying this alone for decades. You gave them permission to talk about it, to get help. That's significant. I just told my story. Sometimes that's all it takes. On Veterans Day, 3 months after the surgery, Robert attended his first veteran event in 54 years. The local VFW hall was packed with aging soldiers, their families, a community gathered to remember. Sarah insisted on coming with him, her hand steady on his arm as they entered. Robert had been asked to speak. He'd said no 3 times before Sarah convinced him. They need to hear from you, Dad. You survived. You're still here. That matters. Now, standing at the podium, his hoarse voice amplified by the microphone, Robert looked out at 200 faces and felt the weight of Martha's letter in his pocket. He'd carried it with him every day since Sarah had read it to him. My name is Robert Hayes, he began, his damaged vocal cords making each word an effort. I served in Da Nang in 1916 for 54 years. I carried shrapnel from an M26 grenade in my neck. He told them about the surgery, about the fragments that had nearly killed him. But more than that, he told them about Daniels, about guilt and survival and the weight of living when others died, about his wife, Martha, who'd known his burden without him saying a word, who'd loved him through the silence and distance. For 54 years, I thought the shrapnel was my punishment, my reminder that I'd failed. His voice cracked. But my wife, before she died, she wrote me a letter. She said the shrapnel was proof that I survived, proof that I came home, proof that love wins over war. The room was silent. 200 people holding their breath. So, to everyone here carrying invisible shrapnel guilt, grief, memories that won't fade, I want you to hear this. You're not carrying punishment. You're carrying proof. Proof that you survived. Proof that you're still here. And that matters. It matters to your families. It matters to your communities. It matters. The standing ovation started slowly, then built. Veterans and families rising to their feet, many with tears streaming down their faces. Robert stood at the podium, overwhelmed. As Sarah joined him on the small stage afterward, veterans lined up to shake his hand, to thank him, to share their own stories. One woman, elderly, approached with trembling hands. Mr. Hayes, my name is Betty Morrison. I was engaged to James Daniels. Robert's world stopped. Betty, I married after the war, took my husband's name, but I never forgot James. She pulled a photograph from her purse, its edges worn soft with age. This is us. Before he deployed, Robert took the photograph, Daniels and Betty, young and in love, sitting on a porch swing somewhere in Iowa, Daniel's arm around her shoulders, both of them grinning at the camera. He wrote me letters, Betty continued. After you saved him, 47 letters in those 3 months. He told me what you did, how you took that grenade for him, how you gave him time to say goodbye. Her voice broke. He died knowing he was loved. That's because of you." Robert couldn't speak. Sarah stepped closer, supporting him. Betty pressed the photograph into his mat. "Keep it. James would want you to have it. He always said you were the best of them, the bravest." "I wasn't brave," Robert managed. "I was just there." "That's what bravery is," Betty said gently. "Being there when it matters most." That night, back at the house, Robert placed the photograph of Daniels and Betty on the mantel next to the picture of him and Martha. Two couples, two love stories, connected by war and sacrifice and the complicated mathematics of survival. Sarah found him there, staring at the photos. "You okay, Dad?" "Betty said Daniels died knowing he was loved, that I gave him that." Robert's hoarse voice was barely audible. "For 54 years, I thought I gave him nothing." "You gave him 3 months. You gave him time for 47 letters. You gave him the chance to say goodbye." Sarah stood beside him. "That's not nothing, Dad. That's everything." Robert turned to his daughter. This woman who'd become a healer, who'd chosen to save others the way he once saved Daniels. "Your mother was right about all of it. The shrapnel was proof that I survived, that I came home, that love wins. So what now?" Robert looked around his house at the photographs on the mantel, at his grandchildren upstairs doing homework, at Sarah beside him, at the life he'd been too afraid to fully live for so many years. "Now I stopped just surviving," he said. "Now I live, really live." Sarah smiled, her mother's smile. "Good, because we have a lot of time to make up for." "Yes," Robert agreed, feeling lighter than he had in decades. "Yes, we do." Outside, the new American flag rippled in the evening breeze. Inside, for the first time since Martha died, the house felt like home again. Some wounds, Robert realized, never fully heal, but that doesn't mean they can't stop hurting. Sometimes all it takes is the courage to stop carrying them alone for 54 years. Robert Hayes carried more than shrapnel in his neck. He carried the weight of silence, the burden of believing that protecting others meant hiding his pain. He thought distance was safety, that walls were armor. But Martha knew, she always knew, and she loved him anyway, not despite his brokenness, but through it. The real wound wasn't the metal lodged near his spine. It was the decades Ethel spent believing he didn't deserve forgiveness, connection, or the simple grace of being human. When Sarah read her mother's letter aloud in that hospital room, something shifted. The shrapnel that nearly killed him became the key that unlocked everything he'd buried. Sometimes our greatest pain carries our greatest truth. Sometimes the thing we're most afraid to face is the very thing that will set us free. Robert learned that survival isn't the same as living, that heroism isn't about being unbreakable. It's about letting others help carry what's too heavy to bear alone. Have you ever carried something for so long that you forgot it wasn't yours to carry alone? What would you say to someone you love if you knew they needed to hear it, but you've been too afraid to speak? Share your thoughts below. Your story matters.